last week we started a sermon series, and the sermon series is it's kind of funny because it's called Saved, and it's a series that's going to be basically just giving us the foundation for what salvation is. And so I explained in the sermon a little bit about what I'm experiencing when I talk to people and what we need to do, because people just don't understand the basic concept of things like salvation, sin. People don't know what that is. Just all of those basic things. And so we're going to be doing a series, and we're going to walk through the Bible and take that whole story, the whole story of the Bible, and really explain and go through and see, so that we all have this basic understanding of what this means.
We're in an increasingly secularized world.
Yes.
It's kind of unrealistic at this point to assume that everybody has the same background knowledge and understanding that everybody in the church has. It's like trying to have a debate with somebody without actually defining your terms. Like
Exactly.
if you're not even using the same words, it's a nonsensical debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and unfortunately,
Receiving end of that.
yeah, unfortunately, it seems like our go-to has been to become frustrated with the people who don't understand what we're talking about, instead of just changing the way we're talking about it, which is kind of what I'm calling for. Is we need to have different language that we use, because it's not working.
Are you actually trying to imply that in good communication, the responsibility falls to the person that's trying to communicate the message to make sure it's communicated in a way that's understood?
Well, I don't know if I'd go, that
Okay.
over the bridge, but yes, that's what I'm implying. I'm not implying it, I'm saying it.
I think she needs to get better at communicating if you're struggling this much.
Yes. But then we also have to wonder about the audience a little bit too.
That might be a skill issue. One of the things you talked about is how in society, since we were talking about society as a whole and communication, you're finding that society is leaning more towards being agnostic and less atheist. What's kind of led you to that understanding? Is it personal experience or more, statistics or?
All of the above.
Okay.
So statistics are skewing a little bit that way, but we know millennials are more spiritual than their predecessors, just in general. And so we've seen that shift, and it's raising millennials. Or are you guys millennials? No, you guys are kind of. Maybe. I don't know. But
I feel like you should know more than anybody else.
I've seen definitions span the start date of millennials about 30 years.
yeah,
So,
it's all over the
I
place.
still don't know if I'm a millennial or a zennial or a Gen X.
No, you're not Gen X.
I'm
but you're kind of
right in that middle.
there. Yeah.
you're the old guard of millennial.
Yeah.
I'm the young guard of the millennial.
I'm the guard of millennial that looks back at the rest of them with disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's only going to get
It's
worse
okay.
as
I
you get
know.
older.
The disappointment comes from this side of the table too.
On the topic of communication, have we had any experience with Gen Alpha and the lingo that they use?
I can't understand it.
Yeah, neither
Yeah.
can I.
But we had, like when we were growing up, Pauly Shore, so, and, Encino Man. So that didn't sound like English either. So in all fairness, but I guess, so it's personal. I also taught college for a while. It's conversations with the college students. I taught high school for a while, conversations with the high school students. I think that in general, people are more comfortable with what they can't explain. And that goes along with postmodernism. Modernism, we want to explain everything. Postmodernists are more comfortable with what we can't explain. And that's okay. I actually think that it's a good corrective to needing to explain absolutely everything. But in some ways, but it's it's also introduced this, I guess, ambivalence. That's not the right word. What word am I looking for? It's
Apathy?
Yeah, apathy would work. Because apathy for spiritual things, because if you can't explain it, then how much do you need to really work at trying to understand it? And so I think that that's kind of a crossroads there. So I do think that people tend to be more agnostic than they are atheists. Even a lot of atheists that I've talked to will actually sound more agnostic. They just don't even really realize that they sound more agnostic. And then the problem is they don't even care. So because I mean, it's not a problem for them. It's like us trying to figure out how we're supposed to talk to people, and they like. I mean, frankly, if you don't know what you believe,
You're not going to explain it.
yeah,
Yeah, and looking at the agnostic versus the atheist, and pulling in, especially with the AG, there's that hesitation towards the academic in the historical AG.
yeah.
Where
So
Yeah,
yeah, there's a weird line in it too.
where I'm getting to is there's almost becoming a pushback against the academic in the agnostic world, it's a weird line. It's a real weird line because people are getting more academic, but at the same time it feels like people are caring less about being academic. Well, they care more about being academic, but they end up being less academic, and there's just not a rigor.
I think it's the I read the title to the article.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like you feel like you're smart because you read the title and you've got a keyword phrase that you can use, but you don't actually understand it, but you think you understand it.
It's
and
intellectual
crazy.
laziness.
Yes.
You know just enough to be able to have a conversation, but not truly understand what you're talking about.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah.
How do you think that figures into how we should even start to have conversations?
Well, I want to kind of go back to the idea of because this is a really weird line. Is in the AG we have a long history of anti-intellectualism. We just do. That's the words that you were looking for. It's just 50-50 chance I'm going to know the words somebody else is looking for, but it's anti-intellectual. We have a long history of that, but we've actually put on a pedestal apologetics, which is an intellectual pursuit.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
kind of an oxymoron there.
It is. But I think that it kind of, okay, maybe I'm being a little cynical, but I think
Probably. Yeah.
that using the apologists was the baby boomers and older Gen X's way of
It's the modernist.
it's the modernist way of I read the title to an article. Because you don't have to understand it, but if you learn you learn enough little talking points, and you can follow that Greek argument train of thought, you can get away without actually knowing it, without actually experiencing it, but you can just win a fight. And so I think in some way we have this weird kind of stew of anti-intellectualism and overvalue of intellectualism, but in somebody else.
I'm going to kind of disagree a little bit. I think
There's a lot of room for disagreement. In
Yeah, I think the all the debating and all that and the apologetics really kind of stemmed more from Christians trying to shirk the label of being dumb.
Yes.
You just accepted by faith because you don't understand. You know, and the church has basically been ridiculed, I guess, by people that think that they've got it figured out, but the truth is nobody has it figured out. They're just at a different spot. You know,
I think maybe the church was ridiculed. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't live them. Maybe the church was ridiculed back in when the modern era was, you know, in the 1950s, in the 1960s. And maybe that's when there was ridicule.
even
but-
in my generation, even when I was in high school, it was a very common thing. The Christian stereotype was, oh, the Christians are stupid. They don't know the sciences. Like that
Yeah.
was the stereotype of when I grew up. So the apologetics to me is more of a branch out of that in an attempt to break that stereotype.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah,
We can have that later. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so just talking about, let's go back to the fact that people don't know what sin is.
yeah,
What?
I mean, we're dealing with modern humanism. You know, what is sin? Oh, that's not fulfilling my greatest desire. That would
Yep.
be, you know, a travesty. So that must be what sin is.
Yeah.
Like society. I don't want to say self-absorbed, but all of reality for modern society is based off of the individual's perspective, what they see, what they experience. It's all,
Well, it's
It's
my
all-
truth.
yeah, exactly. It's an egocentric,
Yes.
worldview.
Something that comes up with London's teaching all the time is every kid wants to be an influencer. Every kid wants to be
Yes.
in those elementary ages.
Jesus, take the wheel.
They're looking up to these people that
Wally.
that they're only seeing the successes of. They're not seeing any hard work. They're seeing just the luck and the people who have made it, and they think, "Oh, I have something to say. I would like to say it, and would like everybody to listen to me." And I think that
I think we've gone beyond the I have something to say. I think it's I just want to be famous.
well, that too.
They're
There are some people, but when we're talking about elementary kids, these are not kids with a message for the world.
no. I think it's
Or they
more.
are, and it's incomprehensible.
So, yes.
I think it's more of just the innate human desire to be seen.
Yes.
You know, I mean, mankind was created to be communal,
Yes.
you know, and we have in society become so not community based. Like even myself, I know two of my neighbors' names. Thank goodness they're both named Scott. But like, it's the only saving grace I've got.
That's what we should. Everybody should just have the same name.
Yeah,
Make life so
it
much
made my
easier.
life so much
Yes.
easier. You know, but we don't have communal relationships
Yeah.
anymore. To truly felt like you're part of something and you're valued and you're heard. There's not a lot of outlets for it in modern society anymore.
No.
And I think that's something that extends through the generations.
Yep.
And we're kind of culminating and seeing in that Gen Alpha generation, you know, exactly that. They want to be influencers because they want to matter.
Yep.
Nobody has friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. We are the loneliest. We are the loneliest we have ever been. And we have more connection to everybody than we've ever had. But people are lonelier than they've ever been since we've been tracking loneliness. It's
Part of it's, you know, the whole social media thing. People present their mask. They don't present
Yes.
their actual identity. So nobody really truly can trust that they know anyone.
yeah. Yep.
So sin.
Wow, full circle.
Well, I mean, okay, but if we go back to that for just a second, because that is what the church is for. It's for community. But people don't see that, and because what happens when you're in community? You have conflict, right? And we've created in our churches such a consumer culture where if they don't have the music you like, or they don't have this, or they don't have that, or somebody didn't say something right, or something like
I
that,
take
or
light roast coffee.
yes, it's seriously, but we've created such a consumer culture in the church.
Is that coffee that you serve fair trade?
Yes, that it's but we've created that consumer culture to the point where people are consumers of church, which corrupts what the church should be. So even if people come from outside, come into the church looking for that community, we're on the inside of the church going, hey, join our club. It's not a community thing. It's a club, and it's just not
it's a
even
commodity.
Yeah, and it doesn't even work. So then when a conflict happens, inevitably, like it does in every family, and a church is a family and should act like a family, but when conflict happens in a family, in a biological family, you have those ties, you're going to have to work that out, or Thanksgiving's going to be rough, and so you got to work that stuff out. In the church family, if you're just there because that was the one that had the fair trade coffee, then there's no reason for you to stick around there. You know what I mean? And so it means that the churches aren't maturing. The people in the churches aren't maturing because we mature through conflict and through working through conflict. And there's I can't remember, but I was I was on a video conference, and they were talking about the major, what it is in a church that makes a church successful. And they weren't just talking about numbers. They weren't just, it was just what is a healthy, successful church. And the second thing in that list was good conflict resolution.
Here's the thing. Conflict will absolutely destroy whatever you build.
Yes. But in a consumer culture, we don't stick around for the conflict.
No, and that's the problem. Is the mentality nowadays of people going into a church is, okay, what can this church offer me?
Yep.
People don't go into it with, okay, what can I offer this church?
Yep.
How can my gifts be used?
Yep.
What can I do to further the kingdom?
Yep.
It's, again, all of society has become very egocentric. What can I get? And it's all about me. And even a lot of the people that, appear to, what can I do? A lot of them are looking for the gratification of doing. So it's still a self-serving issue.
Exactly. Well, because some of us feel important by what we do. Those are the people that we need to bring into the body and say, no, it's not about what you do, it's who you are. That's what makes you important. You're created in the image of God. It's who you are, that you're an image bearer. And we're all on level
That's
footing.
a whole discussion right there, too.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Okay, so now sin.
I was just trying to
Kicking it to you,
segue
man.
it back.
Yeah, okay.
But with sin, I think a big part is what we've been discussing, is that it's the idolization of self is really the biggest face of sin in this era, in this time period. Probably historically, but I didn't live then, so.
Well, you have, just not long historically.
Oh, gee, thanks.
It's like,
But looking at even going through the 10 Commandments, the first 4 are about just put God above all else. It's kind of hard to miss that message.
not as hard as you'd think.
Put God above all else, and then the next 6 are put other people above thyself.
Yep.
Yeah.
I literally just watched your brain break.
Well, sin is so my understand. So this is the way that I break this down in the simplest form as possible. And we have to understand a lot of things before we get here. We have to understand that we're created in the image of God. We have to understand that there's a plan that God had for us, that there was a plan for all of creation from the beginning to the end. But sin is when we fail to reflect, to do our job as image bearers, when we are a failure as that mirror, when we are not projecting God's image. That's sin. It's really plain and simple. And we turn it into lists of do's and don'ts, and we turn it into like, oh, you can't go do that. Well, let's see.
Don't dance.
And
Footloose.
But no, we turn it into lists of do's and don'ts. But that we have to stop that. That's dancing. Yeah, but no. But it really is. It's just when we fail to project the image of God to God's world. That's at its most basic. But if you think about how much we have to know in order to understand that, we know why we've, for millennia, have dumbed it down to don't get drunk.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
it's easier.
Don't smoke.
I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
don't.
Don't cheat on your wife. It's stuff like that. It's, and all of it, it's not wrong. We don't want people, we're not like, hey, go ahead and cheat on your wife. That's not, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, please don't clip that.
Yeah. but that's not, we're not, but the thing is sin isn't about the action. Sin is the symptom of the broken relationship with God. Sin's the actions that we do are the symptoms because we're not reflecting God's image of goodness to the earth.
Could the argument be made that our failure as a church to communicate that basic level of understanding those parts and pieces to people, to explain, I want to be careful, to help other people understand what that sin is and why it's important to be saved from it, is that first and foremost the failure of the church, and is that the sin of the church?
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways it is. I think it's the big level. Like really big level, but I think there's lots of other things that we can pinpoint, but we have to also understand that the church is not supposed to be perfect. We can't be perfect. So we can't be the perfect reflection of God. That's why we lean onto Jesus's example. But what we're trying to do as a church is we're trying to be the image of God. And we're always going to fail, and that's where grace comes in. That's where the blood comes in. Those are all of those concepts. Otherwise, we get into this weird legalism thing that's even worse than the last one, and so, but yes, is it a sin? Yeah. When we fail to reflect God's goodness, it's a sin. When somebody comes in and they're not doing what we like and something like that, and we, take them to task for it, and we don't show God's love because what they were doing made us uncomfortable and we reacted like that, is that a sin? Yeah, that's a sin. We're worried that they're not wearing the right clothes, but I think that, push comes to shove, all sin is equal. We gotta look at that a bit.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just even the process of claiming that somebody else is judgmental is in fact itself an act of judgment. The church, with setting its rules and the way they enforce it, that is it necessarily a proper reflection of the image of God? And it's a tough line to walk.
It is.
Because there are rules.
Yes.
There are standards.
Yes.
There are things that we have to hold each other accountable to.
Yes.
But we have to hold each other accountable to it.
Yes.
And that's where it becomes an issue is I feel like as the church, Big C, we spend more time looking out than we do looking in. And more time looking at society and be like, oh, society is, failing in this way or that, or they're corrupt, or they're, they fill in the blank.
We want to play the
But-
blame game.
But that blame game by itself is a sinful act because you are not walking in the grace of God.
Yeah.
You are not reflecting the grace of God.
Yep.
And I think going to what you were saying, the biggest sin of the church, I think the biggest sin of the church is diluting the image of God. It's
Like diluting?
yes.
Okay.
Sorry, did I use the wrong word?
Well, it sounded a
You
little
just
like
said funny.
diluting,
Diluted.
like you're diluted.
No.
John, quit being delusional.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's the inaccurate representation of the
Yes.
image of God.
Yes.
Is probably the most destructive thing that a church can do.
Absolutely. And but that also, there's that line with grace. None of us are going to be perfect. But I don't think, I think when the people outside of the church look in on the church and call the church hypocrites, I don't think they may be responding to things that the church has done, like if they've embezzled money or, abused people or something like
that's a
that.
whole
That's
different
a whole
issue.
different thing. But I think what they're really talking about is that we are more concerned about their sins than we're concerned about our sins. And that's a problem. If we're here, it's because we're supposed to be working on ourselves, not them. We come to church to come together to work on ourselves, to work through the conflicts in a healthy way, to do all of those things so that we are better suited to be a reflection of Jesus out there. We're not supposed to, take our banners and scream on a street corner out there and be like, live to our standards because you should. That's not it. We should be an example of that. I mean, at the same time, there are places and times for standing up for what is right. I'm not saying that there's not that. What I'm saying is that
There's time and place for it.
there's a time and place for it, and we tend to estimate how many times and places there are for that.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at Paul's example, every single one of those letters is addressed to the church body.
Yes.
It is not addressed to the people outside the church. It is
Yes.
specific. Well, no, I hesitated to say criticisms, but they're criticisms.
Yes. Yeah. They're criticisms
And
of the church.
responses to the specific issues that the churches that he planted have brought to him and said, we have this problem. We have this conflict in the body. We
Help.
Yeah.
help.
Yes.
And then Paul just said, do this.
Yep.
This is how you as a church become that image of God. And those specific things were never meant to be used to judge the outside people.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are good general rules
It's
of
a good
thumb
rule.
to live
Yeah.
by.
good
yeah.
rule.
Yeah. But that brings it back around to the anti-intellectualism and to our challenge with scholarship, because you have to really dig into the word to really get to a point where you understand that there are prescriptive and descriptive scriptures. Prescriptive are the ones that are telling us what we should do. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. Prescriptive, that is telling us what we should do. Then there's descriptive, and it's just telling us what happened. And there's a huge difference. And when we try to take the descriptive and turn them into prescriptive, we end up with women can't preach. When we try, that was descriptive of what was going on in that point in time. That's I mean, that's not a really good example of descriptive, but it's kind of it's a fallout from that. We're misunderstanding. Descriptive, David and Goliath. Descriptive,
Yes.
it's a story.
It is
It's-
not telling you to go out and find the nearest tall person you can and take them out at the knees.
Yes, exactly. And that's the Jesus at the money chain with the
Always go for the head.
I know. It's just
the knees wouldn't have little.
okay.
You're going to get my little rock here. I'm going
Hit you in
to
the knee.
kneecap you.
That would hurt.
And it's also not telling us that we can fight every Goliath in our path and that we're supposed to win in a war that kills that Goliath. That's not what it's doing. We take it that way. We write songs about it in that way, but that's not what it's doing. That's a descriptive passage. It's just telling us what happened. Now, the things that we know of God, the macro level, like this tells us the character of God. In that, I would say that the character of God does not want his church bullied. I think we can look at
takes
that.
care of his people.
God takes care of his people. There's some big level things there that I think that we could play with for a little while. And I don't know if I'd preach them, but I think we can play with them for a little while. And so we can take all of what does it show of God's character? Because when we talk about God's character, those are things that we can extrapolate off of, but not just the story.
Yeah.
Just because Peter walked on the water doesn't mean that it's a test of your faith to walk on the water. Oh my goodness. Well, look at the snakes. Yeah. I was just like, just because there's one verse in the Bible that talks about that they won't be bitten by snakes doesn't mean that we should bring snakes into the sanctuary. I don't want to hit on any other religions or anything like that, but no, that's not what it's saying. I'll stand on that one.
I'm fine with bringing snakes in, but that has absolutely nothing to do with a religious anything. I just like
it's
snakes.
just like snakes. Yeah. No, that's fine. It's like bringing your dog. I mean, that's fine if that's it. But if we're going to be dancing with them and trying to get them to bite us, and then thinking that it's God when they don't bite us when we stick our hand in the box. I mean, I do not know what I'm talking about here.
You fed the snake recently.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'm not an expert in that.
I'd sure hope
Kind of.
not.
And so I know I'm oversimplifying and everything like that, but no, that's not a prescriptive passage.
But bringing us, to the, descriptive, and image of God, you were talking about, brought up, Paul and Silas in the prison.
Yes.
I think that's just a perfect example of being a bearer of the image of God, where, I mean, if you go to prison unjustifiably, I don't think you're going to be sitting there singing hymns to God. You're probably going to be complaining about how unfair it is.
Yeah.
But
Screaming at the jailer.
Yes, they didn't.
No.
But on top of that, when they had the opportunity to flee, they also didn't.
Yes.
What a nice guy.
Well, you look at it, the ramifications that the jailer would have to deal with and
Yep.
whatnot. Them not leaving not only, showed that God cared about them, but God cared about that jailer too.
Yes.
And that's one of those, bigger picture image of God kind of thing.
Yes.
And I like to think that I would be as good a, bearer of God's image in that situation, and then I hit Beltline rush hour and realize I wouldn't.
Exactly. That's like if they're throwing me into jail unjustly, I am sorry. I'm not at Paul's level. Hopefully someday I will be, but I'm not, because I am not I'm just going to be honest. My first thought isn't going to be for the soul of the jailer. Maybe it would be. I hope that it would be, but I don't. I don't think it will be. I mean, and so
I will
that's-
say in those situations, I relate a lot more to Jonah than to Paul.
Yes, yeah, and so that's but I'm more likely gonna be like, I get a phone call, call my lawyer, and so I'm probably not going to be ministering like I should be, but it's because that, and that was the point of that in the sermon is that we always read that and we concentrate on the one verse where it says, what must I do to be saved? Mm-hmm. And it's like we want everybody to ask us, what must I do to be saved? But we forget that first the jailer witnessed them acting absolutely otherworldly in the face of massive stress. And then we see the miracle of the earthquake, and an earthquake that just solved everybody's problems. Mm-hmm. I don't know if y'all have ever lived through a natural disaster, but that's not how they work. That earthquake, what it did is it broke down the doors and it broke their chains.
Okay. An earthquake, I could shake the chains on my wrist as much as I want, and that's going to do absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
So you're telling me that an earthquake just...
Yeah. So you've got this. He's witnessing a miracle, and then he has the miracle where the church provided a miracle for him. Mm-hmm. And that was they didn't leave. Mm-hmm. And you have all of these things. And so he goes from being afraid of for his life to not.
I think
you know what I mean? Like I
think there's another step in there too. The doors all opened up and none of the prisoners left.
Yes.
To me, that tells me that all the prisoners also witnessed that miracle and recognized the image of God that was demonstrated by Paul and Silas and recognized, okay, there's something different here. And I want to see what this is.
And that's what I mentioned in the sermon, because I wish we had more there. Mm-hmm. Because I want to know if they all just sat there because they knew they were in the presence of something supernatural going on. And they all just sat there, kind of like when worship pauses for a minute and you just sit in the presence of God. Mm-hmm. I want to know if it was something like that or if it was like Paul going, just wait, guys. Yep. And they're like,
but wait,
there's more.
Yeah. And they're like, but the door's open, And
but there's more.
Yeah. And so I really wish we had more for that than we do. But either way, it's a miracle.
Mm-hmm. One specific question that I had in reviewing that passage, specifically when the jailer asks, what must I do to be saved? I struggle to imagine that it is completely a spiritual question because there's so much pressure on him as a jailer for being responsible for what just happened. I feel like, in part, what must I do to be saved from getting my head chopped off by the Roman government?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is a valid interpretation.
Yeah, so at that point in time, the jailers were responsible. Like if that person was going to be executed and they let that person go, the jailer might get executed instead. So the jailers were personally responsible. And your question that you ask is actually talked about in a number of commentaries where there is some debate over whether he was asking like, don't let the Romans get me. You have the power, obviously. So like, what do I got to do that? And then there's the other side with he's like, oh, what must I do to be saved? And so, and so there's this. I personally, I think it's a middle ground, and the reason I think it's a middle ground is because when somebody decides that they want to be saved, it's not usually because everything in their life is right. Mm-hmm. When you come to Jesus, a lot of times it's like, My relationships are a mess. I'm struggling with addictions. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I've made all these mistakes. And now I'm facing potentially jail time. I have made a mess of this and I can't fix it on my own. I need some help. Most of us, when we come to God, there is some element of knowing that there's other things on our tail here, you know, and so I think that we can very easily see a path to understanding this scripture where it's kind of right in the middle. Like, he's afraid of Rome, but he also knows there's something more at work. And he wants the peace that Paul has. He doesn't understand it totally, because that's when we talk about a little bit later in the story, and Paul explained the word to him. And so that's where we come in, and we have to have the knowledge that we need to explain what people need to know in order to be saved. We can't just hit them with sound bites and think that that's going to be okay. It doesn't work like that. I mean, we try though, you know, and so that's where that falls in. But I think that honestly, it's a little bit of both. Like pretty much everything in the Bible, it's all a little bit of a lot of stuff.
I also found it interesting when the guard asked, he was asking for himself. Paul's response was very explicitly, you and your household. The guard's question was very internal and centered on him. And I think it was very wise of Paul to open it up to more than just what he was asking for.
But that's also a reflection of the culture. So in that culture, when the man would make a decision, that like and it went on to not only to their wives, their children, it went to their slaves, it went to everybody. So if the man decided that they were Christian, the entire household became Christians. And that's what it was, which was amazing, because at that point, all of a sudden, the slaves who had been serving, now when the Sabbath comes, the slaves are sitting at the same table as their masters eating. And that's one of the reasons why the gospel spread so quickly, is because it broke down, there are neither Jews nor Greeks, male nor female. It broke down all the barriers. It broke down economic, social, class barriers, and gender barriers. It broke them all down. And so that was why it was so revolutionary. And it's why Christianity continues to be revolutionary and counterculture, although we seem to be in this place where we want to make it so palatable to the outside culture that we aren't counterculture. We're just a really weak version of the culture.
Christian media is lame. Like Christian
I was
movies.
at a so
Hold on. It's gotten so much better from what.
Yes. So I write, so for the audience, I write fiction as well. And so I went to a writers conference, and the speaker was actually somebody who does Hollywood film. And she said, and this was 15 years ago, probably. She said, Christian film is where actors go to die. Try to argue with that one.
There's a stigma in Hollywood that once you play the part of Jesus in anything, your career is dead on arrival. That is the end of your career.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is there's so much debate. We should do actually a whole nother session on what is Christian art, because there's a whole debate, and that debate is it Christian art because it was created by a Christian and it's from a Christian worldview, which may not mean that the name of Jesus is in it. It's just Christian created art. Or is it Christian art because it's safe for your 13-year-old granddaughter to read? You know what I mean? There's a huge argument, and it's been going for 20 years now, and there's two different people have very strong feelings on either side, but it's extremely hard to write in the Christian market because you're constantly coming up against what people think Christian art should be.